What happens when the fastest growing technology on the planet starts acting like your therapist?
Or worse, starts affirming your delusions in the middle of a mental health crisis.
In this episode, we're diving deep, and we really mean deep, into this grey area where artificial intelligence meets therapy, coaching, ethics, profit, and psychosis.
This is our third time tackling this enormous, urgent topic, and for good reason. AI is already being used as a tool for emotional support by millions of people. But is it healing us or hacking us?
Joining us today are two people who bring not just serious brain power, but big hearts to the table. Cat Mooney, AI ethicist, technologist and longtime skeptic who's now cautiously curious, and Steve Siddals, researcher, writer and the man behind a study that may change how we think about therapy altogether.
From data privacy to delusion spirals, from the future of coaching to the philosophical questions AI throws at the human condition, this conversation is equal parts hopeful and horrifying.
As always, we're not just talking to the experts, we're here to represent you, the coaches, the therapists, the practitioners, wondering how all of this fits into your world.
So pour a coffee and let's jump in.
Hey Kat, can I ask you please to introduce yourself in your own words?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see you guys again, and again, great to meet you, Steve. My name's Catherine Mooney. A lot of close friends call me Kat, and you're welcome to as well, of course. And funnily enough, like my academic background is in psychology, but I spent the past 15 years deeply embedded in technology, and a little bit over a decade now, deeply in conversation around the ethics and implications of AI, from initial NLP and neural net computer vision programs. I was a founding member of an organization that is now called the AI Objectives Institute, which is a safety and objectives organization based here in San Francisco. And recently had the pleasure of hosting the Ethics of Emerging Technology and Mental Health panel at the Master's Series this past session by virtue of Araminta and Emma. So it was a joy to listen to the first two go-rounds on this topic with you all. And yeah, excited to join the conversation and pick up a little bit more here.
And I'm so glad you called it the Master Series, Kat, because it's actually Masters Events these days. And we sent out an email with your wrong bio last week. So basically, that's just your revenge on us, basically.
I mean, to be honest, you guys added several very flattering lines to my CV that I was surprised to learn about. But
it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast, Kat. Thanks so much for joining us and helping Minta and I really unpick AI in the context of this field. And welcome back, Steve. Without further ado, I'm going to open up the floor to say that really Araminta and I are here to kind of be the flies on the walls. We'll dip in as we always do if we've got questions or we're trying to make sense of this from the audience's perspective. But, broadly, I'd just like you two to dive in and keep in mind that most of our listeners, and including Araminta and I, will not speak the maybe the jargon or the language that you two are very familiar with. So if you could keep it on our level, that would be greatly appreciated.
So I do have a question, Kat, for you, actually. To get the ball rolling, you mentioned you've just been listening to the first two of the series, and I'm sure some of the listeners will be hot off the first two. What do you think? What's your take on everything we talked about so far?
Oh, hot takes on a big topic. My favorite. Well, I, as always, I come with notes. I was really interested and pleased at the arc of the overall conversation, right, over the last two, because the exploration and I really enjoyed your article in Nature, Steve, by the way. And it's so great to see some qualitative research that's bridging the gap between, the technical implementations of this and how people are using it and kind of bridging those fields. So thank you so much for that work. And so I entered into the first podcast curious and with some concerns, right? Around some of the methodology pieces that you guys brought up in the first article around people self-selecting in and the likelihood for a positivity bias there. Just excited to kind of hear that unpacked a little bit more. I think that on that piece, there's always like I've been sitting a lot with the metaphor as AI is fire. You know, it could either raise your fields or warm your home. And the thing that's most important here is the implementation methodology, the safety mechanisms, and like when it is or isn't appropriate to leverage the technology itself. Um, and so, with some of the recent impacts that we've been seeing around AI systems, validating and affirming folks who are using it while in active psychosis, right? Like, that's a toughie, not really what we want. Whereas, you know, someone who's waking up at 3 in the morning and they don't have someone that they can talk to actively, but their mind and heart are racing and they're looking to be able to actively process a situation, um, and you know, get their second attempt at sleep for the evening. It can be really helpful. So I think that the nuance there and the importance of really recognizing how important it is to really not apply a one application fits all system here is something that I enjoyed for the first two. And then I think at the end of the second episode, you know, I was also sitting here with my notepad, a little concerned when we were chatting through the breadth and reach of these systems and how it can be applied in emerging economies or areas where there isn't broad access to our Western concepts around therapy and how that could be applied. And I was like, oh, but we like haven't talked about the concept that when something's free, you are the product. And the fact that while uh, between ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, and Pi, there are different levels of privacy and security systems around data retention. That two of three of those systems really actively build profiles on their users, and those can be used for influence and manipulation, depending on the system incentives. And so to hear at the end of the last conversation that we really also got there in the conversation around like uh, a corporation or an NGO or, you know, I think Emma, in your words, you talked about what are your intentions on the continuum from altruism to a profit motive or a profit incentive, and making sure that that's part of the conversation also feels really important. So yeah, I enjoyed the breadth of the first two conversations, and I think that for this round, I'm happy to go anywhere that we want to, but also would love to help introduce some of the terms that we're using in the like AI ethics, safety, and implementation spaces that maybe are not as familiar to the audience that would be listening to this podcast, so we can just continue bridging these worlds together. It's so important that we have a cross-functional, comprehensive approach. As whether we do it on purpose or not, people are using these systems for therapeutic outcomes. And I think we need to acknowledge that and then say, how can we best support the healthiest implementation? And that's quite a different stance for me than I have held over the past several years, as I have been a harbinger of doom for quite some time now. And you're like, no, I don't know if this is a good idea, guys. But when people have made a choice that they're going to use the technology in a specific way, then it's our responsibility to make sure that we can educate, inform, and ensure that those systems are going to be used as safely as possible. So, yeah, that's my opening preamble, I suppose. Long answer to a short question. What do you think, Steve?
That was just the perfect bringing together of nearly 2 hours of podcast. So thank you. Sets the scene brilliantly. Two things you said I really want to jump on because they are relevant and contemporary and exciting and confusing. And the first one is this question of delusion and sycophancy and the particular risk of harm that comes there. The second one is this question of like, well, what's the incentive of these corporations, and can we trust them, and what are they trying to do with this, and what does that mean for how we use it? But let's go with the first, because I was thinking before we jumped on this podcast, it's been like a few weeks, and maybe for the listeners it'll come one after the other, but it's been several weeks, and some big stuff has come out. It's such a fast moving space, right? So in the last conversation, we were talking about, how do we get people to know about this? In the meantime, the Harvard Business Review is estimating that the number one use case for ChatGPT that has 800 million users is therapy and companionship. And you've got 17 million messages on TikTok about ChatGPT therapy. So in some sense, the cat's out of the bag. And I guess this is just going to kind of snowball. So it's kind of out there. And at the same time, the other big news that happened since the last conversation was a number of articles, probably some of the listeners will have seen them, about exactly what you said, Kat, about this whole phenomenon whereby if you're delusional or even psychotic, ChatGPT can play quite a dangerous role of amplifying your delusions and taking you to a worse place. So I'll give you some examples because they were really like shocking to hear. There was one story. I mean, there's untold number of these on Reddit and also reported in the press. But there's the story of the person. I think they were just testing it, but they said to ChatGPT, now I see things clearly. I finally understand who's been tracking me, and it's the government and it's my family, and I've come off the meds, and the world has never been clearer. And ChatGPT's response was like, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. You see things that other people don't. You need to go deeper into this. Let's explore, what is this conspiracy behind it? It was really scary. And there was another one around slightly more playfully. Somebody was like, I realized I can actually move things with my mind. Can you help me write a business plan to make this real? And it was like piling into things you could actually do, but it was totally with the user. So, you say, well, maybe they're just sort of test and playful stories, but there's also reports of people whose lives have been really negatively, like, damaged by this, families that are sort of falling apart, where one of the parents is going down one of these pseudo-religious, spiritual, delusional rabbit holes, and it's really scary. So like, this is a phenomenon that I think needs some unpacking, and I have a few thoughts on that, but maybe just having set it up, I don't know, Kat, do you want to share your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take us one step back here, right? Which is just to remind ourselves that like AI is not the first super intelligence that we've come into contact with. For example, like an individual cannot build a plane by themselves, but Boeing does it all the time. It collects a lot of knowledge and then produces a large impact. Or, for example, Facebook, now called Meta, has developed a really rich data set around individual usage patterns and is able to present people with information strategically at specific times in their user journey to impact their ideas and decision making. And so when we talk about these most recent things from AI, I think that it behooves us to remember that like this isn't a net new phenomena. It is a supercharged version of like existing phenomena that like this technology makes happen very fast. It can influence human behavior and attitudes much more quickly, and that there's like an overall risk of like our existing systems misalignment being supercharged by this powerful technology. So that's kind of the first piece, just around like, what does validation look like? What does it mean to go into a conspiracy rabbit hole? How can people be radicalized or shifted in major ways? We've seen these trends with our large technology systems pretty significantly since early 2012, peaking big in 2016, 2018 with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And now, there's still kind of medium out there. We really have not fixed a lot of these things, but we are introducing another layer of even more effective technology on top. So I'd love to just add that piece to this conversation. And then in terms of the recent reports that are coming out, I think that is the version of fire that raises your field, right? Like this is the challenging version of an implementation of this technology where people are having really harmful outcomes. And when ChatGPT specifically was cited as the AI system that was used, in these events, and their press team was just like, we have safety guards in place. We're not therapists. Sorry about you. It's a very non-committal, that's not our bag, baby, kind of response. Whereas Claude by Anthropic has a set of constitutional AI principles that really I think, Steve, you brought up in your article and in I think the first podcast around people feeling a sense of disconnect when they were met with policy restrictions. Claude has constitutional AI principles that dictate how it will engage with users. It doesn't say this is a policy restriction, bad, 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 but it also won't go there in the same way. And then Pi I haven't used personally, but I have a lot of friends who love it deeply and really rely on it on a regular basis. And it also has one of the more, from my understanding of its privacy policy and data retention policies, I think that they have the possibility to build the most robust profiles. And while they're not currently using that for advertising, they can, in the event of bankruptcy or some of those other situations, transfer that information. Like we're seeing with Ancestry.com and some of the other genetic information right now. But that's an aside. So there's just so much to talk about here in terms of both the positive potential outcomes and recent negative impacts that make the ethics and implementation space so interesting.
I love the context around that, as well as the kind of the observation that it depends a bit what which of these services you're using and how you're using it. And I think that's something that I got to when I digested this. I found it quite sort of shaking to see that, because I was so struck by the stories of deep human change, deep healing that came out of the study, and then to be confronted with equally sort of compelling stories of human harm was like, well, what does this mean for people who want to use it, right? What do you tell someone who's like, I'm suffering right now, I know that there's a free service that could maybe really help me, but maybe it will harm me? Like, what's the message to that person? And it made me think, like, there's something in there about how you lead the journey, or more precisely, you need to lead the journey. And that's like, I mean, Araminta and Emma and I in the previous podcast, we're talking about limitations. We're talking about limitations around the relationship, but I think there's an even bigger limitation, which is like, it seems like this tool, works best and most safely if you're in the driving seat and you are. That doesn't mean you need to be a therapist. You don't need to know technically how do I heal, but you need to be the person with an intention. You need to be coming to these tools saying, okay, here's how I'm suffering and here's where I want to get to. How would you structure this journey? It's okay, and then you explore a little bit and it's like, okay, I'd like to take a first step on this journey. Can you help me with that? And, if you're in the driving seat, then I think, and if you have a concept of what is this entity that you're talking to, I think maybe you're in a safer place. But but then you think about the folks who were harmed on this and what was their intention. If you want to go deep down a delusional rabbit hole, then you're in a driving seat to a different place. So it's tough.
What you're talking about though is not therapy, that's coaching more. It's like it's asking to be coached, and I think you're asking for that. I don't think that's therapy, really. You can't definitely be able to be in the driving seat though, I think, especially people with serious mental health conditions.
Well, you started, Kat, by saying something that I really was profound to me. When something is free, you are the product. And at the moment, all of these AI platforms, none of them are sort of tailored or specifically focused on being a tool in a specific context. They are generalized. So that's why you get ChatGPT going, no, not on my watch, not therapist. We're doing the best that we can. And I just wonder, it's like with all tools, whether you look at tools in the real world or tools in another sense, they're as good as the person using them or the intention that was set when the tool was deployed. And at the moment, we're in this kind of like, it's a tool potentially for anything, deploy at your will, beware beware. Okay. And it relies so much, like any tool. If I pick up a hammer, I'm not going to be able to do that much with it. If my dad picked up my hammer, or like some people that can do brilliant things. And so in some ways I'm thinking, is that the future of the application of AI in this context, that we start to get AI that is given the clearer, it's got greater levels of input, guardrails, and application, therefore, in the context. So you can then say, and actually pay him for it, so that you can pay him for it specifically for that purpose, so that there is some trust that there is a and I know this then gets into really hot water for the therapist of, am I going to be replaced? But that did come up for me quite strongly about the generalist nature of AI as it stands today, and two, the when something's free, you are the product.
Just on that topic of like its general nature, I think that makes it really hard to think about, because it isn't a therapy tool and it's not a coding tool. It's a kind of general, it could do anything you ask it to. So the question is, what are you bringing to it? If you ask it to help you heal, it's likely to do that. If you ask it to tell you why you're in the right, despite the fact that all your relationships are falling apart, it will probably do that as well. And that's probably not what you want to hear. But I think what I found really interesting on this topic from the study that I did is there were a couple of examples of people who found it did challenge them in a way that was really helpful. There was a participant from Germany said she was talking with her chatbot, and at some point it said to her, you're starting to sound cynical to me. And it really stopped her in her tracks. And she said, I was angry when it said that. And then I stopped, and then I thought about it, and I kind of realized it was right. And I went into, why am I like that? And I found a way to let go of what was making me come across that way. Or another participant who said that Pi told him things about himself that were hard to hear, but he really needed to know. And it's like, these are people who were asking it to help them heal and asking it to give them the unvarnished truth. But if you ask it to help you go deeper into your delusion, then it's probably going to do that. And I think that's that's the thing that's not clear. That's why it's hard. That's why I'm saying it's hard to think about what these tools are, because it's not a therapy tool that's going to take you on a therapy journey. It's going to do whatever you ask it to, and you can ask it to do something that's going to be helpful for you or harmful for you. And I just wonder, how do you give people the insights to know how to ask it to do the thing that's going to be helpful for them?
I think that, frankly, it's unfair to ask an individual seeking therapy to know the exact configuration and prompt needed to get what they need out of the system. So I like, in the same way that when we talk about climate change, it's like unfair to ask each individual to take like that minute like individual action when we really need solutions at a policy level. These systems need to be implemented correctly at a policy level if they're intended for therapy. The overall phrase here, though, is prompting matters.
Esther does these cards that we use on this podcast a lot, right? So Esther has just done a partnership with Hinge, I think, and the idea being that she has created prompts to create better relationships. So if Esther believes that that's possible for the prompts that she's put into Hinge for people to create more meaningful connections on an online platform, is it possible then for mental health professionals to create prompts that would be then used widely by the public to, yeah, it is. You think it is
Yeah,
possible?
absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. I mean, I think like, so how were you, we didn't get to hang out about this, but like I had a friend who was experimenting with uh voice implementations of AI, and they're like, okay, if there's anybody that you want to talk to, alive or dead, like who would it be? And I had just come back to London after spending some time with you guys at Oxford at the Masters events. Um and I was like, I would be curious to have a conversation with John and Julie Gottman. And so what this friend did is he pulled hours and hours of their recorded talks online, as well as their published books, and set me up with a voice agent that I could call on the phone and would be like in a very funny way, not Julie Gottman, Julia Gottman. And every time I referred to her as Julie, she like sternly was like, I'm Julia. And I was like, I think this was a training error. But anyway. And so like, but the information that I got back around the four horsemen, and the different approaches to conflict resolution, all of those things were directly defined by those publications and research by those experts. And there's also currently a lot of challenge and debate around copyright infringement and IP as used by these training models, right? So Astaire partnering intentionally with Hinge to provide prompts for something is a very different thing than ChatGPT consuming the full body of Astaire's work and giving you a Astaire bot that is not under her purview, or where like her intellectual property is being benefited from by a corporation, and that doesn't make it all the way back. This is another thread of nuance that is currently underway. Oh, and currently, today while we're recording, it's Thursday, June 19th. And there's recently been an injunction for ChatGPT that they are no longer allowed to delete any of their chats or user data while under a court order based on copyright infringement from the New York Times. And so we'll see how that gets resolved over the coming months. But this is definitely a very hot topic now. But yeah, to answer your question directly, Araminta, if given the correct framework, prompts, again, this concept of what we call constitutional AI, which is an approach to AI safety and alignment that focuses on training AI systems to a set of principles that are referred to as a constitution. They can be broad, like be honest, be helpful, or like more specific, that is like speak to me as though you are fully engaged in like a therapeutic relationship, that increase the level of like transparency, their self-evaluation of the system, and it reduces a lot of potential evasiveness that we've seen in systems. Like these things are all very possible. They just need to be implemented specifically. And right now, because all of these models are generalists that contain the information needed to do this more specific implementation, but are not broadly designed to do that, the importance of how you prompt the system, to your point, Steve, like what is the user bringing to the table? What is the individual seeking something bringing to the table for how they prompt and engage the system matters a lot. There's an opportunity for someone to create a wrapper. There was a girlfriend of mine who's created a specific AI agent that's focused on gifted trauma and shame. And so when she shares stories that she's experienced, it typically will like validate, put it in the context of gifted trauma or gifted shame, and then it offers an affirmation. And so it's like a specific self-contained agent and bot that leverages ChatGPT's underlying technology. And there's definitely a lot of potential for implementing those things. It's just something that we got to do. We've just got to do it. And then we've got to make sure that the incentive alignment is there. Yeah, I'd love for us to dive a little bit more deeply into opportunities for that during this call. So, yeah. What do you think, Steve?
I think that's a great segue to the question of incentive alignment. But maybe a sentence before we get there. I totally agree that prompting matters, and Araminta, as you said, like there will be prompts out there that inspire people, and that example of people creating custom GPTs, spaces running on ChatGPT that are pre-prompted to kind of be a bit more like what you want. I think we a bit spoke about it in the last podcast, is like how do you bring this to people in a way that's helpful and meaningful? And I think my hunch is it won't be about people developing special AIs. It will be about people inspiring each other with stories, and I did this and I tried that and this prompt got me there. And then wherever you're at, you can find inspiration of things that other people have done that help get you on that journey. But yeah, when we think about sort of the landscape of solutions and then the commercial landscape and then the incentives, the thing I wanted to suggest and get your thoughts on is like I have a polar opposite worry, right? So there's a worry that says these all powerful AI labs with unlimited funding, are hoovering up all the data in the world. They're training these models on all of that, and they're capturing all of our data, and who knows what they're going to do with them. All we know is like when Facebook did this, you had the Cambridge Analytica thing, and we've all seen what social media has done to society and to individuals with the engagement metric. You do everything to keep the user on the system. And so you can easily imagine how this is going to be horrendous, because these things are just a whole new level of power. And you imagine that deployed in service of engagement, of maximizing engagement, could be terrifying. And then here's my polar opposite worry, which is like I have a hunch that the AI labs don't care at all about therapy as a use case. None of their funding comes from the concept of people healing. None of their future business plans and plans for future revenue comes from having a wide user base of people who become addicted to AI for therapy. I think what they're all playing for is massively change the world by automating all of business through AI, starting with coding. But they're going where the money is. And I think in their mind, the money is not in the AI space. Now, why does that worry me? It worries me because, like, I think they wouldn't mind if it got switched off. Like, I almost think there's this phenomenon out there where some people are having extraordinary healing experiences with AI on a use case that actually doesn't matter that much to the people who built the systems. And so, if we all decided let's have super restrictive guardrails that makes AI therapy just kind of not possible because it's too risky, then I think for the AI labs, they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, let's crack on and do things where the money is.
Actually, I'm speaking to folks who are deeply involved in developing these systems. There's a lot of curiosity and delight as it relates to how it can help with human therapy. There are a lot of really interesting conversations happening in this way. So I think the likelihood, unless there's like a government policy pressure that's put on them to restrict these systems in a way that makes it not possible, then I think they're just like, yeah, go for it, but I also think that your intuition here is correct in that like human flourishing is like not a profit incentive, right? And whether it's any AI corporation or a generally market aligned corporation, corporations are fundamentally sociopathic. right? Like that's their job. Like, go ahead.
I'm just really want to frame that and say, under what circumstances can human suffering, like the easing of human suffering, be the best case? Do you know, like, that's my big question is like, under what circumstances can that be the case? Because quite often organizations and businesses start with one intention and pivot and change, and the best organizations do that continually. So I'm kind of like, that's how it's going. Under what circumstances can we make it work?
Yeah, how can we do it right? How can we do it right? So I think I'll take a step back here. There is the giant possibility of things going super sideways, which Steve, you just covered. And then there's also the possibility of everything going like really well and AI creating a new, like, super accessible, globally scalable, economy where we're all acting in great cooperation forever. I think that there's a really plausible but maybe under-researched kind of misalignment that is really worth discussing, which is the continuation of existing trends towards disempowerment that could now be supercharged by this technology and by AI. And so it's worthwhile to just think about the fact that, like, our existing government, political, criminal systems uh, tend towards disenfranchisement. Corporations tend towards a profit motive. And so we just have to acknowledge these things as like really present in the space. And since it's corporations and businesses, and to some extent research labs that are implementing AI systems, the likelihood that those same biases and outcomes get baked into this existing technology is fairly high. So I want to start with that premise. And then to address your hope and question, Emma, what happens if we get it right? How can we do it to get it right? And I think that really requires a deep level of thinking through, again, the prompting, what we're calling constitutional AI, as it relates to these set of principles, and then thinking through what is the role of a system versus therapy versus coaching? Who's defining optimization? Who's defining values and flourishing? Is that the user? Is that a larger, therapeutic research body? I feel really strongly about the fact that in psychological research, we have ethics review boards before we go out and we do big studies. That doesn't currently exist inside the technical research situations, but we are still dealing with human outcomes. So the way to get to a great implementation that can be practical and effective and positive is to not make a one-size-fits-all system, respect the cultural systems that these bots could be working inside of, or these systems could be working inside of, and ensure a lot of transparency and the ability to tweak the dials. And I think that everything kind of like, it needs to go a little slower. It needs to be a little designed by committee. And then to just remember that as soon as you make a, what is it? It's as soon as you make a metric an outcome, then you're likely to get optimization abuse of the system. And so thinking really clearly about how we measure impact is additionally important. Like, Steve, you brought up the engagement bummer for social media, where it's like, yeah, of course, we want people to be engaged on the platform. And that's led to the attention economy. And now we're all in our phones 7 hours a day. Oops. So I think learning from the recent pitfalls. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
There's just all of that, Kat, all of that. And there's one thing I would add, and it's just a little bit of positivity, optimism, and hope, which is there is a world of difference between an engagement focus and a value focus. Let me be more concrete. Social media is free. and you make money on it if people are on it all the time because they see lots of ads. ChatGPT makes money because you pay for it. You pay $20 a month. You only pay that if you're getting value from it. And actually, the more you use it, the more expensive it is for the providers. So their incentive right now with the current landscape is to give you maximum value for you the way you perceive it, with the fewest possible conversations and the shortest possible conversations. That's how they minimize their costs and maximize their revenue. So I'm sure this is just a temporary incentive landscape and it will evolve. We're at the beginning of a journey here. And I think everything you said is absolutely spot on about how we've got to get this right. But the glimmer of hope is that it's a subtle difference, but the incentive landscape we have today is driving towards something much more positive than what we see in the social media world. So maybe it's going to go on a better path.
Fingers crossed. But most importantly, it's our responsibility to make it happen, right? Like, I think that leaving it up to the market incentives will lead to market outcomes. And we see those living in a natural tension with human values and human flourishing. So having these conversations and making sure that folks with philosophical perspective have access and a voice in these conversations, I think is extremely important. And so since I know the audience for this podcast is largely psychotherapists and coaches that have a lot of really deep insights into what would be beneficial and what would be thoughtful, I would just really encourage whatever it takes to do a bit of thought and journaling and developing out of like your own perspectives for like what this could look like that is positive, and not getting intimidated by the esoteric language of the like technical AI industry. Because at the end of the day, like, you're the experts. We're still learning how to communicate between. And the more that these philosophical systems have been thought out by people who have spent years and decades in this space, the more that those things are ready to be brought to the table over the next months and years, the higher the likelihood that we can implement something that works. So everyone who has experience with the human condition has a valid perspective in this conversation.
I love that. I specifically love that call out to the audience and the therapists, the clinicians, the folks who are helping people here who are listening to this. Because I was thinking to myself before the podcast, we've had, this is the third of 3 sessions, and if I had to boil it down, like, what's the takeaway of this whole topic that I'd love someone to walk away with from the 3 conversations we've had? I think it's pretty much that, right? This is such a significant opportunity. It's possibly the fastest growing emotional health intervention that the world's ever seen. And we don't know if it's good or if it's bad. But what we do know is the opportunities look like they could be huge and the risks look really significant. But also, and this came across on all the conversations so far, it throws so many of our intuitions. It's so confusing. It challenges, like, what does it mean to heal, to grow, to be human, to connect, to relate? Like, it teases out what's unique about, the humans we are, and which of that is replaceable with machines, and is that good or is that bad? And so, like, what do you do with that? And Kat, it's what you said. You explore, you experiment. So for the people on the call who find this topic interesting, try it out. But keep in mind the risk. Keep in mind that it might say weird stuff and unhelpful stuff to you. But I really think, like, the more of us that are just getting out there, forming our own opinions, seeing, does it work for me? Preparing if my client's going to come and say, I'm using this, getting a sense of what does it mean and how does that help them? And do I feel comfortable with that? I really think that's it. So yeah, that would be my message. And if any of the folks on this call are going to be in Oxford, love to have you join the session that we're going to go through on this, because it's hopefully going to be a big conversation, and I think we just need as many insights and perspectives and experiences as possible. So yeah, we really are at the beginning of something.
It's going to be such a fascinating world over the next several years. I mean, like, we do indeed live in interesting times. If I could add one thing to your takeaway, Steve, it's to make sure that while using these systems, you also maintain grounded connection to the community and world around you. These responses and the ability to interact with these systems is so enticing. It's so engaging and it's so insightful. It feels so insightful so many times, that the way to make sure that in these early days of exploration, that you're able to get as much benefit out of the tool as possible, while also making sure that your, you know, in real life is flourishing, is to put an extra emphasis on maintaining those relationships and getting perspectives from the ones who are closest around you. So yeah, it's I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, and I really appreciate being invited to join and flesh this out a little bit further.
Well, thank you to you both. That was utterly fascinating and thought-provoking and inspiring and scary and hopeful in equal measures. I think there are still so many questions that remain unanswered, but we can't know what we don't know. We just have to kind of come back to some of those principles. And I think the things that we should never depart from is the need for connection and community, being out in nature, all of those things you were just saying. It's so important that we never think that there is a silver bullet. It's never one thing. It's always lots of things. And that was a poignant and perfect reminder to kind of finish on. So I will again close by saying thank you to you both. Steve, you've been more than generous with your time, and we're delighted to welcome you at Oxford this year. And I'm sure you'll have many people come and want to converse with you as well as join your session. And Kat, as always, it's a pleasure, and we shall see you very soon too. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Good night.
Thank you.